but we don't ingest licorice.
Yeah, a little like licorice. Probably if you chewed it, you would have.
And what's the mushroom?
It's a reishi mushroom.
That's
Are
one
we
of the
planting
kinds.
those?
No, we're not doing those. We're only doing edible. We ordered plugs of spawn for our community garden, but only of edibles. Figured that was a little too esoteric for us.
Yeah. Well, I've got. I think I brought some. No, I didn't bring those.
No, they
If I did, I'd share them, but I brought some
ones.
shiitakes also, because I grow shiitakes too. I didn't grow this reishi, although I've experimented with that, but I do grow shiitakes. These are a little bit on the older side. But I actually have a garden upstate where I do more, but I'm an herbalist here in Brooklyn too. These are kind of old shiitakes, but I brought them anyway. But yeah, so maybe.
And are you at third root?
I'm not at third root, no, but I think they do good stuff. So yeah. So just let these guys ras off, and then we'll get started.
Well, we got we're usually so make it drag away.
Okay, that's cool. All right, well, let's get started talking then. So. Basically, yeah, my name's Richard, and I'm an herbalist. I'm here in Brooklyn, not here in Manhattan, but I have a practice, so I give consultations and stuff and teach a lot of classes, a lot of it at the Commons on Atlantic Avenue, which if folks don't know, if you get to Brooklyn at all, that's a wonderful place. A lot of Occupy activity there too, but all sorts of stuff. And yeah, do you know the Commons?
Part of Occupy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's actually how I ended up here. Was do you know Sergio?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was the one who suggested I do something today. So yeah, that's good stuff. I don't think I've seen you there, but maybe we'll run into each other at some point. So anyway, my thought for today was really, I've had conversations with some of the Occupy folks, but this applies to anybody, obviously. But what are sort of some of the greatest needs? And of course, there's a lot of needs. There's first aid needs with the medics and all sorts of things. But it seemed like two things that were cropping up a lot were how to keep your immune system strong when you're kind of out there protesting and potentially occupying, and how to keep your stress levels down to a reasonable level. And when folks were still in Zuccotti Park, sleeping well was a big issue too, as you can imagine. That might come up again, so we could talk a little bit about sleep. Kind of a lot of the herbs used for stress are also used for sleep. We're a small group, so maybe we can introduce ourselves and have a discussion too. I mean, I can talk, but I'm sure there's a lot of knowledge in this group also, so I don't know if you want to just go around, we can say hello to each other.
My name is Renee, and well, if I have time, I work as a homeopath. Mm-hmm. And I actually wrote an article once, 20 years ago, about homeopathy and demonstrations, where you have all the, it was sort of, you can have it in your pocket, and if you get hit by a water thrower or whatever happens, what do you do?
Excellent. You should make sure that gets out. That'd be very useful.
It's not in English, so.
Ah, well, translate it.
Yeah. There, OWS have a translation service.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
I'm TC. I know probably next to nothing about herbs, so anything is,
cool.
great.
This image will be
I'm Madeline. I know a little bit about herbs, but I have to admit I fall back on chemical drugs. I lose faith.
It's the society we live in, right? So,
I'm Anya. In the past couple of years, and kind of especially with Occupy happening, I'm feeling a lot about how much healing we need and how we need to shift from pharmaceutical dependencies and kind of go back to the root of all things. And I'm actually taking an internship on herbs and herb leveling in Western Massachusetts. So, but I'm also in Brooklyn, so I kind of bring it all full circle and do work here, spreading this good, powerful medicine.
that Chris Morano by any chance that you're studying with?
Gold.
Oh, Gold Thread. Okay, yeah. I don't know them as well, but there's a good herbalist, Chris Morano, who's out in that area too. So,
Tinctures and salts and potions. I was here trying to figure out how my new strap worked, and I saw a meeting of herbs. So I didn't know this was happening. I was about to learn and listen.
yeah. Pull up a seat if you want. They're a little wet, but up to you. Yeah, okay.
Michael, I live in Brooklyn also. Until I got to be 65, I never had medical insurance of any kind, and so I was forced to figure out alternative medicine if I wanted to get any kind of symptoms, or I'd seek out people who would help me try and understand what the hell was going on with my body, why were these things happening, what changes I needed to make in my lifestyle and so on. Herbs as things that they can use preventive medicine. I'm a little like Madeline, I'll slip back occasionally. I'm right now taking some medication for the stress things from occupying heartburn, nervous indigestion, acid reflux. She gave me whatever it's called, ranitidine. When I was going to go the third route, they said, "God, you must have some herbs that I can take to strengthen my stomach."
Yeah.
And I looked through the book, it seems to be wormwood, centaury, and forgetting the other two. I don't see you have them here.
No, but
So if
yeah.
that was a specific thing, there are people like me, I think, who what it get. You'll either get migraines, lower back pain, or stomachache if you're under
Yeah.
stress. So
Yeah.
anything that
This isn't a bad choice there. It's
Catnip?
catnip, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Believe it or not, yeah, catnip doesn't do to us what it does to cats. My joke is like it would be illegal if it did. You know, we'd be rolling around on the floor and everything. But actually, catnip is a wonderful herb for stress that manifests in the GI tract. And a lot of stress does. And so, you know, again, I'm going to kind of focus more on immune system and stress, and talk a little bit about those in an interrelated way, because they are very interrelated. But we can go off in other directions you guys are interested in. But yeah, I mean, a couple of things with stress, why it's important, especially in a protest mode, but this applies to other parts of life too, is I would say two major reasons. One is that if you already have an underlying condition, stress is very often a trigger. So, you know, often when I'm working with people, for instance, or if somebody has a health condition, they're trying to keep it in check, controlling stress sometimes is the single most important thing they can do, no matter what it is, whether it's migraines or whether it's acid reflux or whether it's an autoimmune condition, lupus or MS or whatever it might be. Often if somebody learns techniques for keeping their stress at a reasonable level, not eliminating it, because that doesn't make sense and that's not what even our goal should be, but keeping it at a reasonable level, then sometimes that's the single most effective thing that you can do. The other is that stress can also cause new illnesses and new diseases, and stress, there's nothing wrong with stress in the short term. You know, like a day like this, to one degree or another, all of us are going to be revved up at a certain point. You know, our adrenal glands are going to be pumping, and you know, a lot of people are referring to that now as eustress. Some of you might have heard of EU stress, which means good stress. You know, and we're probably actually adapted. What's that?
Oistress.
Oistress. Yeah. Well, that would probably be the more correct pronunciation, right? in Greek. You know, the point being that we're probably meant to have occasional stress, but it should be occasional. You know, where we get stimulated into that sympathetic nervous state. You know, that fight or flight state that people call it. Although that's, you know, been critiqued as well. But either way, you know, our hypothalamus gland gets pumping, and our pituitary gland and our adrenal glands start pumping out adrenaline and cortisol, all of which can be beneficial in the short term, especially if we need to be hyper aware. We need more oxygen to our cells. We need more sugar circulating in our bloodstream. You know, the liver starts releasing sugar into our blood when we're under stress, and when we actually need it, like some people might need it today, that can be positive. That can all prep us physiologically for what is about to happen. But when it's becomes chronic, and when we start to have that kind of stress response to incidents that don't warrant it, that's when it can start to create illness and disease. And so a lot of the things that happen under stress, like for instance, the effect on the GI tract, what the body is doing is it's shutting down all of the physiological processes, or if not shutting down, at least slowing down the ones that aren't necessary when you're in a bit more of a survival mode, which is what that sympathetic state is. So it doesn't make sense for your body to focus on digesting well when you're in kind of short-term survival mode. So when you have that stress response, for instance, when I have that kind of excited state, my appetite just disappears. It's gone. I don't eat. And which is fine if it's for half a day, but if I got stuck in that mode, that would begin to be a problem. So symptoms like acid reflux or indigestion, people with like conditions like irritable bowel syndrome or colitis, ulcers, they almost always get exacerbated by stress. And particularly with the GI tract, we have what's called the enteric brain. I don't know if anyone has come across that. Yeah, it's our guts have a bundle of nerves that's far greater than in anywhere else in the body except for the brain and spinal cord, and it actually responds on its own, independently of the brain. The gut reacts to what's going on in our lives without necessarily having to receive a signal from the brain. And so all those like old sayings we have about trust your gut and your gut will tell you, and they're all true. You know, our gut reacts immediately, and so the gut is really where we have that biggest immediate reaction to stress. So an herb like catnip, for instance, which is a mint, so it's closely related to peppermint and spearmint, and lemon balm is another one I've got here somewhere. A lot of the mints, the aromatic mints, are carminative, so they're really good for indigestion and cramping. But then catnip is also kind of a very mild, nervine, maybe very, very mildly sedative. You'd have to take a lot to actually feel sedated by it, but it's kind of calming and soothing. So when stress manifests in the gut, it's usually a very good choice. And the other one I have here that's a good combination for those two is valerian would be one. Actually, I have two more. And lemon balm, which is somewhere. Does anyone see one marked Melissa? There we go. Yeah. So, I mean, I can pass these around. These are mostly tinctures I made myself. Now, one thing is, if you take all the calming and soothing herbs early in the day, you might not want to take a lot. Like, I've made that mistake of passing them around and everybody's just like, really? So you might, well, feel free to taste, but especially valerian for some people like brings you way down. So you might want to try a drop, or you might want to just smell it or something. Lemon balm? Yeah, so it's another mint, and it's really, but also a nervine mint, so it's a great choice for that. But good for stress in general, all three of these herbs. Valerian is even better if you're having trouble sleeping. Valerian is nice because it'll actually help put you to sleep, but it very rarely makes you groggy the next morning. It actually has some regulating activity. It's not just sedative, it's actually has some stimulant and some sedative properties, so it's kind of regulating that way. But there are like a very small percentage of people who will take valerian and get wired from it. They get stimulated but never sedated, so it's not, instead of being regulating, it just wires them. So it's always good to, if you've never tried it before, to try just a little bit. But again, if for instance, if you were also being affected by stress in the way you're sleeping, not being able to fall asleep well, or your sleep quality not being good, valerian is also a really nice choice for that. And unlike these other two, is more likely to help you sleep well tonight if you take it this evening, versus lemon balm and catnip may help you calm down if your anxiety is keeping you awake, but they're not going to induce sleep per se on their own. Another herb that actually will help put you to sleep is California poppy, which is a Scholzia, which is also a good anodyne or pain-killing herb. The best pain-killing herbs are illegal. Opium and marijuana are both good, but I don't have either one of those here. But this is actually related to opium poppy, and you will fail some drug tests. So it's always good to let people know that too.
I depend on failing drug tests.
Yeah, I avoid anything where I'd ever have to take a drug test, but you know, you don't want to get someone in trouble by not telling them. Yeah. So you, California poppy. It's a native. It's in the poppy family, native plant to the West Coast. You can grow it here though.
Orange flowers.
Yeah, beautiful little orange flowers.
Especially in big fields.
Yeah, but pretty easy to grow. What's that?
Do you know Robin Rose?
We've met, yeah, but I don't know. Yeah.
We have a medicinal herb garden in our town. We adopted an intersection, occupied 6 years now to grow all these babies. You know, we got 45 different varieties in there now.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Very nice.
Well, I live in the same town. We're in sustainable group.
Yeah, hops is another one now, where which will actually, but hops is much more likely to make you groggy the next day. Not everybody, but if you're really having trouble, if you're having insomnia and really having trouble falling asleep, hops is one of the better herbs. But you know, hops is actually related to cannabis. It's in the same family, the Cannabinaceae family, and it can kind of make you feel groggy the following morning. But it is a nice one if someone really just can't fall asleep. Hops is also really nice for women with hormonal imbalances that are affecting their stress levels or their anxiety, because it has some phytoestrogenic properties. So women who have, say, get very anxious during PMS or menopause-related anxiety, which isn't uncommon, hops is helpful. Or another herb that's good in that situation is, I had one more here. Yeah, blue vervain is another nice one, which is a native plant for that. And again, if anyone wants to smell or try or taste or whatever. But the other things that stress does, besides the GI tract effects, which is good to keep in mind, you know, a lot of people know about its effect on heart disease. It's huge. It's the #1 risk factor for heart disease.
What was it? I didn't get the last.
Stress.
Which remedy?
No, not
verbena.
Well, that's verbena. That's blue vervain. Not sure what the
You said which remedy is good for stress and heart disease?
Oh, I didn't get to that yet.
Oh,
yeah. But you know, stress is actually the #1 risk factor, and depending on how it manifests emotionally, like for instance, there's some studies showing anger is actually the #1 risk factor for heart disease. Hey, welcome. So, for instance, if you were a person who like ate horribly and never exercised and also went through life angry, the anger would actually be your biggest problem in terms of heart health. I mean, all three are, but
so do cholerics have more heart diseases? Does anybody look at that?
Yeah, people, you know, of course, all of the major research goes towards the profit making, right? So, but there are some interesting studies that show a real correlation. Yeah. Yeah. So it's something to really learn to control, especially through meditation or Tai Chi or a practice like that. But then herbs can help with that too, which we'll get to. But you know, stress also in the short term stimulates our immune system, but chronic stress will deplete it. It'll increase your risk of catching colds and flus and other infectious disease. It'll increase, if you have an autoimmune condition, the likelihood that disorders are exacerbated. If you, besides immune system, chronic long-term stress also depletes and impedes our reproductive function. You know, probably a lot of people know stories of like couples who were trying to get pregnant and it wasn't until they stopped trying that it happened. Stress and tension is actually keeping reproductive function from working properly. So there's a whole kind of host of, I'm sure I'm leaving other things out, a whole host of other things. And all of these things, diabetes, our risk of diabetes, our risk of osteoporosis, because again, the body's shutting all of that down in the short term when we're under stress for good reasons. And in the long term, it begins to lose its purpose. So besides, you know, like I mentioned, meditation and Tai Chi or deep breathing, Qigong, all of which are really key. The adaptogenic herbs are really, which I'm sure studying that you know about, are really key to if you're experiencing that chronic stress. And what the adaptogenic herbs help us do is reestablish our body's ability to adapt to stressful situations physiologically and psychologically equally. So when our hypothalamus access, endocrine axis, neuroendocrine axis, that's responsible for all of this, gets out of balance. We really want to look to adaptogenic groups. So, reishi, which is a mushroom that can grow, and reishi is a Japanese name. Its Latin name is Ganoderma, which means shiny skin. So this is actually not varnished. Sometimes like it's varnished. That's just what it looks like. But Ganoderma will actually grow wild around here. I gather it every summer myself in the woods. I have seen it in the city.
Prospect Park?
I have not, but I'm sure it's there. But I have seen it actually on the Brooklyn streets. Believe it or not. Not that I would gather mushrooms if you have any option, because mushrooms will really gather up pollutants and contaminants readily, even more than plants will. So I go up the state and or into New Jersey and gather them. But you do want to learn to identify, and that's a pretty easy one to learn, but don't go after this talk. But you can learn it. Reishi is an adaptogenic herb, so it's wonderful for chronic stress. In Chinese medicine, it's used to treat what's called disturbed shen, which is when our minds become so influenced by chronic stressors that we start to develop anxiety or depression, insomnia, melancholia. And reishi is one of the best herbs for that. It's got thousands of years of history. It's very bitter. So, the simplest way to prepare reishi is to gather or buy or grow the mushrooms, and you can decoct them. You can just cook them for several hours in water. Over, kind of lightly boiling water, and you just drink that root, and that's the most affordable way, and it's the most effective way. But it is very bitter.
On the chair, dried it, but now my thumb is wet.
Like
cold, yeah.
Same here. So shiitake mushrooms actually are not as adaptogenic as reishi, but they do one other thing that reishi also does, which is they're both excellent immunomodulators, so that your immune system is off balance. The medicinal mushrooms like reishi and shiitake are some of the absolute best abilities they have. And they can be really affordable, like I said, especially if you grow them yourself. Shiitakes are really easy to grow. Reishis are a little more if you're a gardener or you're used to paying attention to detail, it's not hard to learn how to grow these. And shiitakes are wonderful immunomodulating medicine. They're used widely in Eastern Asia in very serious conditions, HIV, chronic hepatitis, cancer protocols. So they have anti-cancer activity. And like I said, immunomodulating, which what that means is they're regulating to the immune system. They're not stimulating or suppressing. And a lot of pharmaceuticals stimulate something in your body, some physiological process or organ, or suppress it. And one real difference in a holistic approach and the way a lot of herbs work is they can also regulate. And so shiitakes and reishi, for instance, can be used if someone has an immune deficiency or an immune excess condition. So an immune excess condition, something like allergies, hay fever, this year is a pretty bad year for a lot of people. These can actually help tamp down that immune response. But then also an autoimmune disease I mentioned, but immune deficiencies are also really useful. So for instance, if somebody's coming down with a cold or flu, or you want to prevent a cold or flu, these aren't the right herbs. These are kind of long-term tonics. Keep it simple, and garlic, is one of the best things. You don't have to get fancy about herbs at all. You certainly don't have to walk into health food stores, although that's great if you need something there. But a couple of cloves of fresh garlic, and fresh is the best, is one of the best ways to fight off colds or flus. Echinacea, which I have here, is, where do I have that? Is
wonderful. Hang it on the doorway, right?
Well, you could. I mean, that's more for vampires, but for cold and flu, I would at least eat it too. But much better than a pill. I mean, there are. Yeah, but if that upsets your stomach, you can chop it up fine and mix it with food. You don't have to eat it alone because it can be a little harsh. Yeah. Or echinacea, for instance, which tincture is really the best way to take echinacea because there are a few herbs that have to be made from fresh plant material. A lot of herbs can be dried or fresh, but there are some herbs like echinacea, if you dry them, they're going to be inert. They have a very short shelf life. They're going to be inert very soon. So like echinacea tea, for instance, you know, you might get a 20% positive placebo effect, but it's not very effective. So you can make a tincture from the fresh roots or flowers or seeds, and you can pass that around. And that's great for like an immune boost. If you feel yourself coming down with something, you're out here on a cold, rainy day, or you just know, you know, this is the kind of time I get sick. It's cold and rainy. I'm going to be, you know, stressed out, maybe in a good way, but I'm going to be like revved up all day, and I almost always get sick within a day or two after that. Like, start pounding echinacea and garlic, that's great. Over the long term, if you get sick a lot, you know.
So the echinacea, you were saying the dried herb has a short shelf life. Is that the same for the powder that's in the capsules? Would they also be effective after?
They would be. Unless there are some companies that make like a fresh extract and then they encapsulate it. So if it says on the label made from fresh plant material, it's probably okay.
Okay.
But that would be the only way. If they just dried up echinacea and put it in capsules, it's not good medicine.
So I thought that it was just the root, which means that destroy the plant. Like you can make it from flowers and seeds.
Flowers and seeds are both good too, but the leaf is very weak and the stem is basically inert. So those wouldn't work very well. But yeah.
But the flowers or the roots?
Yeah, the roots more commonly used, but the flowers, and if you chew on the seeds, you'll just feel that echinacea buzz. Like they're really powerful. Yeah.
Chew on the seeds? We got those in the garden, don't we?
The root or the flower or the seeds or a combination are all good. Yeah. You know, the best way to make tinctures is to learn a little bit about it, and because the alcohol percentage can vary depending on the plant, that's going to work optimally. But if in the case of echinacea, if you're able to chop it up as fine as you can get it, if you don't have, or if you have a blender, you know, mix in some vodka or a combination of grain alcohol and water, and just blend that all up. You know, you can get more sophisticated, but at least for starters, that'll get you started. But then these herbs, if you're getting sick a lot, if you're just someone who's just coming down with colds and flus all the time, or some other immune imbalance like I mentioned, then, you know, echinacea and garlic are going to fend off what's coming at you right now, but they're not going to tonify you underneath. And that's where like reishi or astragalus come in, which is another Chinese herb, but also can be grown here. And again, you can decoct that or just cook it. You can make a tincture if you want to get fancier and stuff, but those are great long-term immune tonics. So you might not see an effect for a few months even, but you will really see it start to improve your immune function, especially if you're already doing other things like eating well and, you know, exercising and all that, of course, which is important too. Astragalus, yeah. So it sometimes looks a little different from that, but you can grow it, or you can get organic astragalus now that's grown, you know, here in the U.S. It's becoming more available now. A lot of the Chinese herbs, sometimes they're not always available, but these two are.
So is that bark or is that root?
This is a root, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a vetch, actually. If you know vetches, yeah. It's a species of vetch. But a specific species, you can't, you know, substitute a different vetch.
And it's relatively easy to grow?
It's not too difficult. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Does it need full sun, or would it grow in partial shade?
Not too much shade. So as much sun as you can give it.
Yeah. We have our community garden is all shady. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah, but well, grow the mushrooms, right? Yeah, and I mean there are other herbs that you can use, and then. Licorice is another one which you thought this might be like, and I love the taste of licorice, so you can pass that around.
Sorry.
Licorice is another wonderful immunomodulating herb, and it's also a wonderful adaptogen. It's also got some hormone regulating phytoestrogenic activities used in a lot of female remedies and formulas in China and Japan and Korea. It's an ulcer remedy. That's one of its longest European traditions. It's one of the herbs I use the most. The only thing to be aware of with licorice is it can, in some people, mildly elevate blood pressure and fluid retention. So if somebody already has high blood pressure or is on meds or that kind of thing, it's not the best choice for them, you know. But for most people at a normal dose, it's no problem, and it's wonderful stuff. And I kind of like tinctures for talking about like occupying and protesting in particular. You know, they're easy to carry around, and they don't need any special kind of storage. Just don't put them in direct sun. But you know, unless the temperatures become extreme, they're pretty hardy, and they'll last decades. I mean, the shelf life. Wow. If you get over a 25% alcohol level, then you really are safe in terms of preventing any microbial growth. And for most herbs, alcohol extracts will preserve the activity of the herbs for years and years and years and years. You know, you look at like even the tinctures you buy in a store, the brand name ones, most of them don't even have expiration dates on them because they don't ever really expire. They'll last, you know, I tried a 60 or 70-year-old Caba tincture once. That's not what this is. And it tasted great. It was like some of the best Caba I ever had. So if you want to pass around Caba, we can talk about that. Yeah. If you've never tried it before, you might want to try just a little. Yeah.
I remember I once got Caba, like capsules from GNC.
GNC in general sucks. Yeah, GNC's horrible. I mean, out of the big like chains, the Vitamin Shop at least has some brands in it that are good. GNC, I walk into, I'm like, all of it sucks. So, Vitamin Shop, you can find some better brands. Capsules can work if they're made by a good company. Like if you want to talk about buying herbs, Herbalist and Alchemist is a tincture company based in New Jersey, so they're local. It's all organic. I really like them. Herb Farm in terms of an easy one to find, and they make like a Caba capsule. That would be good. But these are hard, you know, if you want to keep things more affordable too. Caba tea works also. You know, you can make a tea, and yeah. Yeah, Flower Power is great, and they actually, behind the shelf, behind the counter, it's mostly Herb Farm tinctures, so yeah. Yeah. If anyone doesn't know Flower Power, it's one of the better herb shops for sure, if not the best. It's on the Lower East Side, so it's like 9th and 1st. And it's a little shop, and it's just bulk herbs and tinctures. It's herbs, and I think they have some essential oils and flower remedies. Yeah, but it's all herbs. It's not like a health food store with all sorts of stuff. Yes. Caba, Aba. What's that?
Restores male vigor.
Well, Caba, I don't think of Caba so much for that.
Maybe it's something with a similar name. I remember there was 3 herbs I was taking something back.
Caba would help if anxiety were the problem, which it can be. But what Caba is one of the best herbs for like real anxiety, even bordering on panic. Like people are having a panic attack, and you know, the anxiety is really rising to an impairing level. Caba is one of the herbs, like it almost can't be beat for that. And some people it hits really hard. Like I've met people who try Caba, and even a little dose, and they need a ride home, you know, or get put out, you know, someone has to escort them or something. It doesn't affect me quite that much. Some people, you know, dosage people need vary a lot. But for like real anxiety, again, kind of almost bordering on panic, Caba is one of the best herbs we've got, and it's.
How long does it take? Affect you?
It should affect you right away. Yeah, very quickly.
You see the riot cops, time for little.
Exactly. It's a great one to have around in a situation like this.
Get grounded.
Yeah. Right. For the medics to have Caba, because it like say someone's like hyperventilating, they're not breathing well because they're, you know, anxious. Maybe they just got hit. Maybe a friend is hurt or arrested, or, you know, this is an excellent herb to have on hand. You know, I can't think of a better one.
That is good. That is really good information.
just brewed a thermos of Caba tea before and sit here all day when I knew I was going to be in situations.
It just, yeah, and the interesting thing about Caba, like I said, there are some people who kind of lose, you know, it affects them much more strongly. For most people, it doesn't do that, and it actually increases focus is one of its traditional uses in the South Pacific. So it's really interesting because some people call it a sedative, but it's not really sedative. It's very relaxing, but it actually can help fine-tune your mental clarity and focus at the same time, which is a really interesting combination.
For ADD,
potentially. It might, you know, Caba isn't an herb I would want to see a kid on every day long term, but maybe for like the worst days. But there is another herb that for ADD, which is Tulsi or holy basil, which I'll also pass around. It just tastes like a really strong basil. Easy to grow, by the way. It's a sacred plant in Hinduism, and Tulsi is also a great adaptogenic herb. So everything we're talking about, if you're under chronic stress and you're feeling, you know, either it manifests in the GI tract or your, you know, heart palpitations, or it's making your blood sugar shoot up, or any of the above, Tulsi is one of the better herbs to just help regulate that adrenal function again and bring it under control. Again, especially you combine that with something like meditation or Qigong, you're going to be in really good shape. And Tulsi, historically, traditionally, is used also to improve mental clarity and focus. And a lot of kids with ADD, adults for that matter too, sometimes like women going through menopause who have mental fog. I've used it a lot with people who have Lyme, who get that same kind of mental fog going on, and their memory, they lose their short-term memory and can't concentrate. And basil is a great herb for that. And it's very uplifting. So it doesn't have a sedating quality like some of the other herbs. It's very kind of energizing. It's not stimulant, but a lot of people take it and they say they just feel uplifted, you know, after taking it. So. Yeah, so garden basil is Ocimum basilicum, and this is Ocimum sanctum. And actually, garden basil has the same properties, just a lot weaker. But
is it Magical Michael? What is that? Is it Thai basil?
If it's Ocimum basilicum, it would be you want to look for Ocimum sanctum, and there's a few different varieties too, but it's an Ayurvedic herb, so it's the use comes from India, but it grows fine here. If you grow basil, you can grow that. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Tulsi.
What happens if for about a month now I've been feeling an anti-anxiety, and I was jumping around between like valerian, skullcap, and I guess now Caba. What happens when you mix something like to mental clarity with a kind of sedative like Caba or
Yeah, so that's a good question. So Caba, like I said, I prefer, it depends on the situation, but I prefer, like, Caba is strong enough that I don't necessarily like to see people take it every single day for years and years, although there are places in the South Pacific where people do that, so it's not like I'm opposed to that, but it's strong enough that, you know, I think that you should be figuring out ways to control the anxiety in a deeper way, but Caba is great as a bridge, or to just keep on hand for those really bad days or bad moments. But then if you look at like Tulsi or Reishi as like the underlying tonics to deal with anxiety or stress over the longer term, or then you mentioned Skullcap, which is another wonderful herb. Actually, I'll take a shot of this too. Skullcap, Scutellaria laterifolia, which is skullcap, which is another herb you have to use fresh, actually. So, like a skullcap tea ain't gonna cut it, but a tincture is a good way to do it. But skullcap is actually not really sedative. So what's really wonderful about Skullcap is it's what herbalists call a nervine herb. So it's calming and soothing. But this is a very nourishing nervine, what some herbalists call a nervine tonic. You would have to take a mega dose of Skullcap to feel an actual sedating effect from it. And that's why, like, if you're trying to calm down today, for most people, unless you're really sensitive, Skullcap isn't going to cut it, whereas Caba would. But if you're somebody who has anxiety as an issue in a more ongoing way, Skullcap is a wonderful herb to take over the long term. And you could take this herb for weeks, months, even years if it was still, indicated. So Skullcap actually combines really, really well with herbs like basil or reishi or licorice. Caba, again, I think is a little bit more of a temporary aid, in my opinion, for most people. Other great adaptogenic herbs like ginseng. So here's American ginseng. This is milder than Asian ginseng, but both of them are a little bit stimulating. So that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. If somebody who's like really, really depleted and exhausted, maybe, again, talking about occupiers, somebody who's been out for, day after day for months, maybe rested repeatedly, other real challenges, and just maybe hasn't been eating well as a result, been getting sick a lot, really depleted, really exhausted, what in Chinese medicine might be called vanquished qi. Their vitality is becoming really shot. Ginseng is wonderful, but it is a little bit stimulating. Again, American ginseng less than Asian ginseng. But for somebody who is depleted and exhausted, but also kind of wired and anxious, sometimes ginseng makes it worse. So that's what you have to watch out for, that if you're more kind of on the exhausted, don't want to get up, depressed end of the spectrum, ginseng can sometimes be the best choice. But if you're more on like the anxious end of the spectrum, reishi or another Ayurvedic herb, where's the ashwagandha? Anyone know ashwagandha? It's another Ayurvedic herb, and this is sometimes called the ginseng of India. This is also used for male reproductive dysfunctions or sexual vitality, actually for women too, just like ginseng is, although some of that might be due to the fact that when you're depleted and exhausted and stressed out, your libido shot, your sexual function shot, so it's all interrelated. But the confusing thing about calling this ginseng of India is that whereas ginseng is stimulating, ashwagandha is actually calming and in large enough doses sedating. So if you know somebody who's depleted and exhausted and maybe their immune function is shot, they're getting sick a lot, again, all of their other conditions are getting exacerbated by stress, but they're also anxious, kind of wired, and maybe with an anxiety-related insomnia. There's a lot of people like that. Ashwagandha is a great choice. It's wonderful because it's building and nourishing at the same time as being calming. And the Latin name for ashwagandha is Withania somnifera, and somnifera actually means it brings on sleep, right? So you can see like it's been used that way for a long time. And I can pass that around too if people want to try that. And then there's other herbs like St. John's wort, classic nervine, antidepressant. So if somebody over the long term is really depressive, this can be a wonderful choice. But maybe I'll just stop here and we can just kind of see what There's some herbs I didn't talk about, but yeah, that might have been before you came. No, that's okay. Catnip it's in the mint family, and it's an aromatic mint, so it's closely related to like peppermint and spearmint, and it's a really good carminative for improving digestion. So if you have cramping, indigestion, bloating, gas, even more serious conditions like irritable bowel syndrome or colitis, catnip can be really helpful. But it's also a nervine, so it's also kind of very mildly calming and soothing. So especially if your GI symptoms get worse with stress, which is very often the case, it's a nice choice. Yeah, it's a good medicinal, definitely, not just for cats.
What's the best way, do you think, to learn more about just like what situations to use using different herbs and like what combinations work and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, there are schools, and actually, let me before I forget, and people start heading off to other things. I did bring some cards, which is not at all to promote myself. It's really like if you have questions or follow up, shoot me a text or an email. Like I'm very happy to answer questions and stuff. So take one if you want it. If not, that's cool. And there,
could you do a?
I'd be very happy.
Do stuff, make things happen. You've got to do it all right now. They burn out and they're no use to anybody.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that, you know, and it's not about herbs alone, of course, right? It's about stepping back when you need to. It's about meditating or something similar. It's about eating well. But the herbs can really, especially these adaptogenic herbs. I mean, I use them myself when I'm going through periods, and it just makes a huge difference. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, if people need to move on. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah,
One
thanks.
of our trainings.
But I'm happy to keep chatting.
One of our trainings we had when we get to demonstrations, we have people doing grounding exercises, deep breathing, grounding exercises, sort of feeling of the bubble around yourself. You're aware of your surroundings, but still centered in yourself. Together with standing, you know, like instead of standing 2 feet side by side, standing like this, like you do in Tai Chi.
Yeah.
So you can move back.
That's key.
Forward.
And then start out before that with some Tulsi tea.
Yeah.
And some ritual, and you know, burn some lavender. I mean, some lavender aromatherapy, or burn some sage, and man, you'll really be there.
We will be so much more powerful. I mean, you're joking a little about.
No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. Yeah,
I mean, you're saying
I was smiling, but
yeah,
I'm serious.
I think so.
Yeah.
And we've got some. It's a little bit of an uphill battle because it's perceived as woo-woo, but when Starhawk came here from the West Coast, she had lots and lots of people do what she did. She led a really awesome heavy-duty consultation in one of the private public spaces down on Wall Street after an accident, where a lot of people got arrested, but she kept she helped keep the exercises we done ahead of time, kept everybody together.
Because also when people are on edge and they're nervous and they're anxious, you know, you also make mistakes too, and maybe you're not judging the situation and making the right choice, whatever that choice is, right? But being centered and grounded and being able to really think through what's going on and what the best action is for you to take, and can make all the difference. So, if you know the right people, I'm happy to do that anytime.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
good.
Yeah.
And that's also why we're trying to push this idea of affinity group organizing with your spokesperson that goes to the spokes council to coordinate with other groups, because in a smaller group, if there's a dozen of you, half a dozen of you in a demonstration in the middle of a big mass, you can make more sensible decisions because you can huddle, you can communicate, you can decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
And then one person goes to that group, you talk to the people from a dozen other groups, and you can quickly have a decision. You don't panic like that as much. You move like fishes in the water when the sharks are out. And it's coming, but I think put together, the herbal medicine, and like you say, the body movement stuff, the meditation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you been working with the medics at all?
I've had some conversations, and it's sort of things haven't gelled, but but I'm going to talk to folks today too.
Especially the Caba.
Cava's a key one, definitely. Absolutely.
And does it come in choppers, and can it be bought in little,
like
gel capsules?
Yeah, like a good brand. If you are talking about wanting to buy capsules, I would recommend Herb Farm Caba.
Okay. And is that something they could have more easily?
Yeah, and I know you asked me a question, but if you want to email or text, I can tell you more about like ways to.
My girlfriend's definitely interested in like going to some kind of school, so like I'd definitely like to be able to. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the sort of the problems of stuff with a dropper, making sure everybody isn't touching their lips to it. That sort of thing is harder to administer. Whereas if you can just hand somebody a little,
it's true.
Round,
yeah, I mean the one way you can
gelatin ball.
Yeah, so that Herb Farm's a good brand, or you you could make Caba pills yourself if you wanted to, but what you can do is just drop this in a little water also and gulp it down, and that's a good way to take it.
Yeah, that
So-
way, yeah. Bring out your water and do this in a shot glass.
Yeah.